Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc Business Show.
We've also developed some specific options for the IoT. So we've been starting to roll out some LTE networks based on 4G. We're having NB-IoT where it's needed as well. But our main choice is LTE. And we've also decided to deploy some LoRaWAN networks in some countries.
I have to admit, when the first real deployments of LPWA, or low power wide area networks, were being lit up, I wasn't all that bullish on the competition, mobile operators. Wrong tech and the wrong business model, or so I thought. Fast forward a couple years to today, and those behemoths are getting their acts together. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, I speak with Patrice Slupowski about the mobile operator approach to IoT, and I have to admit, I'm impressed.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc Business Show. This show is made possible by sales of my book, IoT Inc, published by McGraw-Hill, and the IoT Inc Certified IoT Professional, or ICIP, online training and certification program. Become a certified IoT professional by completing the program's 3 courses: ICIP Technology, ICIP Business, and ICIP Strategy and Digital Transformation. Details of which can be found at www.iot-inc.com. That's www.iot-inc.com. With me today on the IoT Show is Patrice Slupowski. Patrice is Vice President of Digital Innovation, running Orange's Open Innovation Corporate Product Marketing team. Between 1999 and 2006, he worked at various startups, and before that, he graduated from Paris Dauphine University. Patrice, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bruce. Thanks.
We've known each other now for 3-4 years. We bumped into each other. Was that about it? It was like we've been on different panels together, so it's kind of. But it's been a while, though, right?
Really following all the clever things you were saying about IoT in those IoT World conferences.
That's right. Yeah, it was a long time ago. Now, I didn't know you worked for startups, so what made you switch over to the dark corporate side?
Is it so dark? I think it's kind of interesting to see both sides of that. Yeah. So I used to be a startupper. I used to be working in other small companies, and let's say that I've been now half of my career in big corporates, half of it in small companies. So I think I can speak both languages now.
And which one do you like better?
I try to keep the mindset of being, on the things, being a doer in a large corporate, which is not easy every day, but every time I can keep that mindset, I'm very happy.
So kind of try to do the best of both worlds then.
Yeah.
Nice steady paycheck, but kind of try to be innovative and quick at the same time, right?
No, it's in corporate. I think that you discover that weekends are existing sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, that's a nice thing.
It's pretty good when you have kids, etc. So
now, I've just given a brief history, but why don't you give our listeners just a bit of background of yourself and, in particular, your experience in IoT?
Yeah, well, it's funny enough. I'm now a marketing guy, marketing expert, a product marketing guy on innovation. And funny enough, in 20th century, I used to be a developer. So I was writing hundreds of thousands of C and C++ lines, mainly in ticketing industry as a background before I was coming to and founding a startup in mobile technology. So I try to hide my technical background. I try to behave and let the people presume that I don't understand anything on all the underlying elements, which becomes more true every day.
Yeah, it's kind of like a little competitive advantage if they don't know kind of what you know. But okay, that's good. So you've got a technical background. All right.
That's it. And about the IoT, I think that my first relations with the IoT were I was reading the paper from John Battle after the Web 2.0, where it was the web square with the sensors everywhere. So I think it has opened my mind to the idea that those devices are going to be multiplied, and that we were going to see the extension of the connected paradigm to all the objects around. And I think that with that, and it was about 8 or 9 years ago, at the time where companies like Fitbit were incorporated. I think that this was the time where we've done our first steps on the IoT. I remember Fitbit was a kind of reference for me, because first time I was meeting them, they had just one office with 4 people.
Oh, really?
Second time they had two offices, then 3, 4. Everything was on, in San Francisco on Market Street. Then they were changing offices every 3 months.
Right.
They were doing quite good. And at that time, we were starting to think about, okay, this IoT will be a huge thing. And we were starting to think about the idea of the IoT platform, and we were starting to have a kind of concept about aggregating, because we were seeing that every object was bringing an additional application, and we were not understanding how a person would be able to use so many different applications during the day.
Right. Now, was this the whole time were you with Orange at that time, or were you startups?
I've been 12 years with Orange.
Now, maybe for the people that aren't familiar with Orange, can you give just a little bit of a background about the company?
Well, Orange is not only mobile, but it's a global telecommunication operator. So we're based in Europe, headquartered in France, and we're mainly present in Europe and Africa for the consumer market, and almost everywhere on Earth, where on the enterprise market, where we are providing services and connectivity to our customers. Mm-hmm. So, of course, in relation with the IoT, we are an M2M cellular operator, but we provide several connectivity options. And in addition to connectivity, I think that from the start, we've been positioning several elements that we call enriched connectivity. So this means that we have services, we have IoT platforms, we have data, product and services, we have bespoke and professional services as well. So we're considering that we have a lot of things to bring on top of the IoT.
Yeah, and now this shows you my ignorance, but is Orange in the US as well? Do you have activity beside, I think you have a research and development firm here?
Yeah, we have a very interesting team, which is called Orange Silicon Valley, which is based in San Francisco, just near Bay Bridge, near Embarcadero. Mm-hmm. And they are doing more than research and development. They are doing a lot of things around investment, around startup relations, around partnerships. And sometimes they are doing some kind of research and technology projects with partners. And we have, of course, we have a lot of teams in the US, which are working on the enterprise side, which is a good way for us to be able to provide services to the corporate we're working with, wherever they are in the world. Yeah. So we have a global presence in America and in Asia, everywhere. But if we're speaking about our operator activity, the countries where we have networks are mainly in Europe and Africa, and there are 32 of them.
Now, I'm going to ask you about your connectivity services next, but since we're on the topic, are you offering for your connectivity services worldwide coverage? I know you said your networks are predominantly in Europe, but do you offer a worldwide coverage? Because sometimes, a company will be delivering a product or a service that is international, and it's real painful to have to, do new SLA contracts with different carriers in different countries. There are companies that kind of can do that for you, but what's Orange's approach on that?
Yeah, we have an approach, which is that we've been partnering with some other operators in order to be able to answer those global connectivity needs. For instance, for automotive or for utilities or several type of products, we have the ability through the alliances to be able to cover all the countries, giving this global presence.
Oh, okay. So if they sign up with Orange, they don't have to worry about again.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's
they
that's
can
really
sign
helpful.
up with one of the affiliates, and then they will be able to have access to all the networks.
Super, super important. Well, then maybe you can describe what are the current connectivity options that Orange offers.
Well, we're having, depending on the country, of course, but mainly we're having all the cellular options with 2G, 3G, 4G, and we're preparing 5G, and 5G will be starting to roll out from 2020 in the first countries. We've also developed some specific options for the IoT. So we've been starting to roll out some LTE-M networks based on 4G. We're having NB-IoT where it's needed as well, but our main choice is LTE-M, and we've also decided to deploy some LoRaWAN networks in some countries.
Really?
For instance, in France, we have a nationwide coverage for LoRaWAN. And we've decided to do that mainly because we have seen that our customers were expressing very different and diverse needs. So we were thinking that you cannot answer those needs with one single type of network. So it's important to give, not to give headaches to the customers, because we don't want to bother them with all the specifications, advantages, or benefits of each technology. We want to help them choose, but we have a portfolio of technologies that will be the one answering some precise needs. If you want to send very small amount of data, but battery life is very important to you, we have an option for that. If you want to have a high bandwidth for your IoT and it's going to be permanently plugged, so you have no problem with the power, we have other options like LTE-M. So it was very important for us to give this portfolio of connectivity options.
No, that is important. And besides the battery life and the bandwidth, so we're talking about the two. We're talking about the cellular connectivity, and we're talking about the LPWA or LPWAN connectivity. Can you maybe give our listeners just a little bit more detail for them to understand when to choose one or the other? You did mention the bandwidth. You did mention the battery. Is that pretty much it, or is there any other considerations that should be taken into account?
There are considerations. I think that whether you're speaking about objects that will be moving or still, you would like to use one or a type of technology or not. Whether we're speaking about the fact that you will need some roaming from one country to the other, even if we're working on roaming for technologies like LoRaWAN, this is something that is very easy to obtain on top of cellular technologies. So we have some criteria that can be used to define what's the best technology. We have to think about the cost as well, the cost of the components that are going to be used within the particular technology. We're pushing hard our partners on the market to develop some components, some conductors that will be able to handle several type of connectivity. So they are not finding themselves in front of a challenge, which is choosing the technology with which I'm going to last for 10 years at least. So consider that it has to be quick for the IoT. Digital world is going so quickly now that we want our customers to be able to choose, deploy, get the benefits of massive deployment of technology, and then decide maybe 5 years after to move to something else because there are some more benefits to be found in other type of technology because it has moved quickly now. I think that very often, I am having conversations with customers that would like to have solutions for the next 10 years. And I'm telling them, would you be using the same smartphone for 10 years?
No, and you bring up a good point, and it's kind of a balance there. You want to have a balance between at least, there has to be some horizon where you can do business planning, and probably that 5-year, maybe even 4-year, but around there is probably about right. But it can't be too far, because then you're going to be maybe locked into a technology. And, the example of LPWA networks, I don't know. I was probably not plugged in as closely as you were, but to me, they seem to come out of nowhere and then, hit the scene really fast and it grew quickly. So who knows? I mean, radio technologies, though, they're kind of bound by the laws of physics. So there's not that much more you can do. You got what? You've got power, you've got frequency, and you've got amplitude. I guess that would maybe be the 3 variables, and then so you can mix those up around, and then you can just choose the right radio for that. But it makes sense to have this, at least a 4-year horizon where you can make your business decisions. And in part of the business decisions, I think you bring up a few good points in terms of roaming between countries, and also whether it's still or moving. Those are 2 excellent differentiators where you would want to use cellular. Where you'd want to use LPWA, like you said, would be if battery is really important and you don't have a lot of data, because we're measuring this stuff in bytes. But the other important consideration is business models, which kind of takes us to the business discussion. Can you describe the business models for the different technologies, and how much does it cost? I guess is kind of what everyone would be thinking about or be wondering about.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you detailed pricing, because, of course, pricing will differ based on the market, the type of technology, the volumes, the number of objects we're speaking about. But you will see that there are things which are very close to what we're doing on the cellular market. So we're having subscription-based model. We're trying as much as possible to bring something where you have a cost that is understandable from the standing point of the object. So a price by object for a certain period of time, and of course we are trying not to bring only the connectivity part, but to be sure that we're enriching that, for instance, but with the platform, because not only you will have the network, but you will have the platform that will help you to do all the device management when you're having, for instance, 10,000 objects. It's kind of a hard job to handle them. So you need good features to do these device management, and we have quite a good experience on that because of all the objects we're already, for instance, we're already managing on the consumer side. We have millions of setup boxes, gateways, etc. So it's quite interesting to be able to use those features. It's very interesting also to be able to get the data, not only give you the raw payload that you're getting out of the network, but to be able to break this down into tangible information that are going to feed databases, that are going to activate, trigger some APIs, calls, etc. So this is where really we're speaking about this enriched connectivity. So we're bringing all the platform, IoT platform layers on top of that, knowing that we can climb up to the data analytics part, to using several blocks that can analyze and extract some value from the data as well. And of course, all those elements, our customers may choose to use them or not.
I think that now everybody is seeing that there are probably 1,000 IoT platforms in the world. So we at Orange, we have our own platform, Data Avenue, and we're not considering that it has to be the only platform that our customer will use. So we're doing a lot of things to be sure that we are interoperable with all those platforms in the environment of our customers. And we think that it's very important to be to be really, really working with all the other components. We can provide all the things which are needed, but we can also work with the other. And it's very important, more important than that, to be able to have a global vision on the security of the solution, of the global security. And you know that most of the problems with security may lie in the interfaces between two systems.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where they almost all lie. But this is interesting. I wasn't aware that, and it sounds like it's not just a connectivity or a device management platform, but you, to a certain extent, it sounds like an AEP platform as well, because you did mention analytics. Is that right? Is it a full-blown platform then?
Yeah, and we're trying to integrate also some partners' solutions every time it makes sense. For instance, when our customers want to do some prediction, we're trying to bring up some solutions from experts that have good skills into analyzing certain type of data, etc. So once again, we're trying to bring as much value as possible around a core element, which is the connectivity we're providing.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said the business model for the connectivity portion of it was price per object for a certain period of time, so per time. What's the business model for if they were to then choose? It sounds like it's an option, but if they were to choose a platform, and maybe there's different levels of platforms, maybe just talk us through that business model.
Yeah, and some of the platform services will be brought with the connectivity, so it will be some kind of elements that we're really binding with the connectivity price. Some other elements will be brought as some bespoke professional services, depending on the type of integration which can be done, etc. So sometimes we're having really totally bespoke solutions for our customers. Sometimes it's just we're developing some elements based on the SaaS model. Once again, when it's applicable, and it will be based on the number of calls to APIs, etc. So it really varies on the type of solutions we're speaking about.
But if we're talking, let's just talk about a simple one. You grab the data, you put it up into a cloud. You mentioned that you put it into the databases, so it's somewhere in the cloud, and then you run analytics on that. Is that one business model, or is there a business model for ingestion, into the cloud? Sometimes it's by bit, and then sometimes the business model for running analytics is per operation. Maybe just give us a little bit more clarity on that.
Yeah, it really depends on whether we're speaking about very, very important data volumes, in which case we will have to take into account also the some costs with regards to the hosting of the data itself. Whether we're speaking about we would like to use this amount of analytics where it will be based mainly on the operations, on the number of calls to the APIs, etc. So there are some elements where we are doing our first steps. There are some elements where we know it for a while because it was the model which was already used in the M2M market. So it's pretty easy because it's we're replicating something which has been here for years and years. I think that it's important to be able to provide elements which are quite understandable because, for instance, when you're speaking about the number of objects, this is something which is very tangible for all the companies who have some, for instance, some B2C customers or a certain number of installation, etc., or sites. Speaking about number of objects is quite easy for them because it fits well the business model they're building themselves. So it's important that it is predictable. So I think that we're seeing when we're speaking about SaaS model, it's very interesting in terms of at the beginning I'm only going to pay a few cents, etc. But it's probably less predictable than the model which is based on the number of objects, where you can have your ramp up, etc. So we're trying to have something which is as comprehensive as possible.
No, and you're right. I mean, predictability is very important. But I guess, this is one of the observations that I had in the past, at least with carriers, was if they did just continue using the same business models, and maybe it was slightly different for telematics, but if they continued using the business models that they normally did, and that was, generally now, I don't know, elsewhere, but at least here, the business model is on a per device. So I'm talking about the phone, so the phone is on a per device, but it's got tons of bandwidth. And pretty much here now, the bandwidth, and I know in Canada and, other places, it's starting to be included. But if you apply that to a device, obviously it can't be the same price. But when we're talking about IoT devices, it could be thousands, it could be tens of thousands, it could be hundreds of thousands. So obviously that it might be the same at a high level, the same business model, but the price per device must be much, much lower, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think that there are some prices that were expressed by some players on the market which have been probably very strong in terms of impact, but very far from the reality. I think that we're expecting connectivity to be cheaper in the coming years with regards to what it is today. That doesn't mean that the price per object will change a lot, because we're going to bring more and more services and more elements in addition to this pure connectivity. And so the mix will change, but the price is not going to become zero only because some people would like it to be. So I understand that if you're comparing to what is currently occurring on the consumer, on the smartphone market, you're seeing a kind of simplification of this offer, because more and more people are just taking a flat fee where they don't have to think about the number of calls they're making. They're kind of they're getting, in France, it's very common now to have 30 gigs of data plus unlimited calls for a certain price. So people, when you're having 30 gigs, it's becoming very hard to consume them. And this is what I'm having myself. For instance, I don't have to think about, am I reaching some kind of limit? Will I call during 5 minutes or 1 hour, etc.? It's becoming a very simple service
and predictable.
Predictable. And that's very important from any customer standpoint, because when you can predict, you can build plans, and then it is something. This is what our customers are doing. All the companies, they make prediction. They want to make prediction for the next 3 years, 5 years. And when they have something which is positive for the next 3 to 5 years, then they can launch, and they can massively launch a business, and which is definitely what the IoT is now requiring. Some massive developments and deployments of the technology, because it is going to trigger something that is a part of the digital transformation of all those businesses.
Absolutely. And now we talked earlier about the two different types of connectivity models from a radio perspective. So the LPWA, the low power wide area network, and the cellular. Are those priced the same, or are they priced different per?
No, they're priced different, and they will be priced different because of the existing competitions and offers. And I think that makes completely sense to have that on the market.
They have different characteristics, so
yeah, absolutely, and they will have different SLAs, different type of security, etc. And there are other options. There are some players which are developing some purely vertical solutions based on some mesh networks, which have other type of propositions as well.
Interesting. So everyone listening, I mean, what we're trying to do is educate them a little bit. I know you can't give us a precise price, but we want to give them just some ideas. So I'll throw out a number that I'm aware of, and right now, at least on the MBIoT, I think maybe it is an MBIoT, but that's one flavor everyone of LPWA. But LoRa's another flavor. Sigfox is kind of another beast. We can maybe talk about that. But that's around, where they're trying to go to is around $1 per device per month. Does that sound like in the ballpark for what you guys are offering?
Yeah, I think that whether we're speaking about dollar or euros, which are roughly the same, this is currently the type of cost that we're trying to achieve on a kind of important volume, knowing that some prices were defined on the market, but some speakers were not mentioning the fact that this is the price you're getting when you're having 1 million devices. So we just need to have some clarity. But let's say that roughly it's from a few dollars or euros to one per device, per object, per SIM card, if you're using a SIM card or not. But it's roughly the type of things that you should keep in mind for connectivity.
And the one, let's say 1 to 3, just for, and again, we're just talking rough, so it's just orders of magnitude is important. But is that for just the LPWA, or is that also for the cellular on the higher end of it?
Yeah, I'm not. For instance, when we're speaking about NB-IoT, LTM are LPWA technologies which are based on cellular. So when you're speaking about cellular yourself, I think that you're mentioning the pure cellular. Which are not
is that the right? What's the IoT term then? What is it? How do you term the difference then?
Well, we're speaking. We're at the GSMA, where we're working with other telecommunication operators. We're speaking now about mobile IoT. Mobile IoT meaning NB-IoT and LTEM. So it's part of all the LPWA technology, which are you will find LoRa, Sigfox, etc. in those technologies. And some of them are based on cellular networks. Some of them are not. Or sometimes some people are speaking about licensed or non-licensed spectrum. So on our side, we're deploying both, and we're considering that as long as you're using networks which are operated by a company which is doing that quite seriously, the fact that the processes and the quality of service is more important than the choice of the technology itself.
Right, and the particular use case scenarios. But so what you're saying, just to inform me, is the terminology maybe is mobile IoT, at least from a carrier perspective. Mobile IoT is for all these LPWAs, whether they're cellular based or whether they're, their own radio base.
Yeah.
And then cellular, is that the right terminology for then, the 4G, 3G, and the rest of that?
Yeah, knowing that once again that when you use NB-IoT or LPWA, in fact you're relying on 4G networks.
That's right.
So you're relying on cellular networks.
Yeah. So let's just dissect this a little bit, and we don't have to go too deeply, but I have to say my impression when Sigfox originally came out, and when LoRa came out. So for everyone listening, Sigfox is a little different model. They're like a carrier, so they provide a network.
Yes.
You connect up to it, and then you did mention LoRa, but LoRa sells equipment, and then a network operator can use it, such as Orange, or even a company, can use it. Now, I originally thought it's like the cellular guys that I've even maybe did a podcast on or wrote something. I said, oh man, this is existential risk for you guys, but then. Now, this is where you come into the NB-IoT, and there's also the Cat 1, Cat 2, you correct me, Cat M. Yeah. But these are based on the cellular towers, and all of a sudden you can use more or less the existing hardware without having to put, new transmitters and receivers. You can use almost the same with just a software upgrade. And then it was like, okay, now the cellular operators, they got it, So maybe give a little bit more clarity there. Is that about accurate?
Yeah, that's it. And just to clarify about LoRa, I think that what was key in the decision we've been making to use LoRa and to deploy LoRaWAN networks in several countries was the idea that this is an open technology, which is developed inside a large alliance, and it's probably one of the fastest growing alliance I've seen so far in the industry.
Yes, so the LoRa Alliance.
There is more than 500 members, and in which you will find operators, you will find providers, you will find a lot of people that are taking advantage of that. Any company can use this protocol. It's pretty simple, but we were thinking, and this is what we've done in France in particular. We were thinking that it was interesting to use our skills, our operator skills, to deploy this technology. So to have all the gateways which are needed to be for the objects to connect to these technologies, and we were able to do that with the open model, which is in LoRa, I think, and we're thinking it makes perfect sense for all the objects that are going to communicate once or 2 times per day to send a very small amount of data, because, for instance, they want to send the number of cars which have been passing on the road, and you can have an object which is very simple. You just dig a hole in the pavement, you put the object, and it will be working for 5 years without asking anything to anyone.
Yeah.
We're using that on connected rest areas, for instance, etc. And on the other side, when we're thinking about what the mobile IoT like LPWA, like LTEM, or like NB IoT are providing, those are technologies where you will have some battery efficiency, but it's definitely meant to be having a larger amount of data being transferred from one particular object to a server or to another object. So we're really seeing that as the 4G of the IoT. So it's other type of use cases, because you want to connect, I don't know, you want to connect a bike, and you want to be able to report the position of the bike, or the fact that there is the tire is going flat, or those kind of elements, and you want to report that immediately, and you want to be able to give an authorization to unlock the bike in a second. So those type of use cases are typically the one which will be using the benefits of LTEM or NB IoT. And once again, because we think it's a headache to take the simple facts, technical facts, and to make a decision, we consider that the most important is to start the conversation with the customers to understand the needs and the use cases.
Now, that's interesting. And so my second question is going to be, are you going to continue with LoRa and NB-IoT? Because my first question is, you can do NB-IoT, for example, or CAT-M. You could dumb it down. I mean, it's got the bandwidth, but you could charge, for example, I think it's the business model. And that's really my first question. Is it, why continue having two? I know one's based on cellular, one's based on, in this case, on LoRa, but why continue having two when you could potentially do everything on cellular? Is it because of the business model? You did mention spectrum. You did mention licensed versus unlicensed. Is that why? Or so maybe answer both those questions.
No, there are at least two reasons. I think that it cannot be compared in terms of cost, because one is very simple, the other one is much more elaborated. And on the other side, the battery life and the power consumption efficiency is not comparable. So this means that LTEM is very efficient, or NB-IoT, those technologies are very efficient if you compare that to the other cellular, classical cellular options. But if you compare them to LoRa is much more efficient.
Yeah.
So as long as you're having that, there are room for those technologies. And I would say even in the long term, when you're thinking about 5G deployments, etc., we will see different type of connectivity options, as long as we're having those very diverse needs, where we want to be able to deliver solutions which are tailored to the needs, cost, etc. And once again, we don't want that to be a source of complexity, a source of cost on the hardware side, etc. we want to consider that it's just about choosing the right tool from what you can be doing. Your question, Bruce, would be, okay, why bother having some hammers or screwdrivers when you can do everything with this single hammer? Yeah, you can do everything with the hammer, but I don't think the result will be good enough if you're planting each of them in the wall with the hammer. Sometimes it's good to use the screwdriver, etc. So it's really a question of comprehensive solutions.
Yeah. And I think that's true. I mean, the bandwidth, I just honed in on the bandwidth issue, but the battery issue is a real one. And so, yeah, it'd be nice to be able to present this, in a very simple, and I don't know if it's more complex than this, but number of devices and battery power and bandwidth, I guess, maybe that's the three variables.
Yeah, and seen from the distance, the most frequent use case in the IoT is where is my thing? Where are my things? And whether you're speaking from the industry, consumer, it's the most common thing. But do you want an answer to that question every second, every millisecond, every day, every year? It's
and that tells you which. Yeah. And then going back to the business model, then it's going to be on this spectrum of, let's say, $1 to $4. Now I'll give you a little bit more here, but then it just depends. And then but still you want that predictability, which I agree is very important. So you have your connectivity, then you have and that's going to be on a per device. So it's very predictable. And like you say, companies have to make predictions. So this makes it very nice to put into the financials. And then you might add on some other services, which is very nice to have the option, because sometimes you don't have to maintain another vendor. So then that is, storage, computation. And again, that might be based on bits for storage. It might be based on actions for computation. But something I think you can really help us out with is these dirty little secrets. And maybe another way to put it is like you say, because you go to a conference and they say, oh, we're going to be, and I've heard this, 30 cents per month, for connectivity. Now I don't know that much, but I know enough that I've also been a technical person and a marketing person. So I know that you can and I know a bit about statistics. So you can kind of, you can make that can be true under some circumstances. But when our listeners are shopping for connectivity, what are the gotchas? What are the questions they should be asking to make sure that they're not being sucked into something that's maybe, you know what I mean? So they understand what they're getting themselves into.
Well, normally there is something which is always true, and it's not only on connectivity, is that the less you pay, the less services you get, and the more work you have to do. So this is not going to be really, really different here with what we're speaking about. So I think that it's important to understand that it is something when you're really diminishing you will have less quality of service. You may have less bandwidth. You may have only the ability to use to send some very small amount of data, etc. So it's really really something that our customers have to be aware of. And we once again, and I was one of the first people probably to comment that when you're taking all the technical spec sheets, etc., it's bringing nothing but headaches, because we don't expect the customers to be savvy enough in terms of telecommunication to be able to compare and understand all the different criterions of all the technology. So this is really where we're thinking that it's important to speak about the use case. And whether we're speaking about one industry or another, it's completely different. If you're taking something like metering, if you're speaking about water metering or power metering, it's totally different, because in one case you have a permanent access to power, in another case you don't have this access. So it may change the type of technology you will be using. So we're trying to have this conversation. And every time we have, for instance, we have small businesses which are saying, okay, I don't want to spend time with you discussing, etc. I want something very simple. I can shop a few objects, I can use them, I can connect them, etc. We have built a marketplace for them. So we have a Data Venue Market. They connect, they choose their object, they choose the connectivity option. The objects are provisioned. They have they receive the access code to the platform, and they can play directly with the APIs without asking anything. But this is not the kind of things you're going to do when you want to connect 10,000 objects.
Sure. And I think, maybe this is common sense, but what you suggested makes a lot of sense is, we want our listeners to be informed buyers. And so if they are to be informed buyers, what they should do is maybe, like you said, is present the use case. And this is my use case. This is going to be the number of devices. This is the bandwidth I need. And then, as opposed to going the other way, because the other way is to look at the SLA agreement, the service level agreement, and then say, what's the QoS like you had? What's the bandwidth? And all that will be spelled out there. But it's kind of, again, you're going to need a techie you have to dissect that. So what are your thoughts there?
I think that price is an element. It's a very important price and cost. It's a very important element as long as you're understanding what you're buying. There is a very famous brand in the US which says dress for less. So I think that we cannot say that connectivity is just a question of connect for less. Because it's not only less in terms of price, it's also less in terms of services, in terms of reliability, in terms of bandwidth, speed, etc. So it's very important that our customers are understanding and that it's being crystal clear with what they're doing, because there are many other topics than connectivity in an IoT project. Data is a very important part, whether they will be using some kind of advanced analytics, whether they want to use some AI in order to bring the solution, whether they want to have a good approach in the way they are going to handle privacy for the customers, etc. There are so many questions that it's not only a question of the price they pay for the connectivity.
No, that's very true. And you did mention them, quality of service, bandwidth, security. Can you maybe just speak just a few moments on that? What should we be looking out for from a security perspective? I mean, I think at a high level you mentioned, the security between the systems, but can you give any advice on security?
Yeah, we have, and I'm sure we can speak about that. Also, we have been working on the security by design of the solutions, and we've been also preparing a lot of things. In particular, I was referring to the GSMA. There's an excellent work which has been done on some security guidelines for the IoT projects, and we are making them available. For instance, if our listeners are going to the Orange developer site or Orange partner site, they will be they can have a free access to those guidelines. There are several things that have to be done in order to be sure that you're not taking security as the last element of your solution. So not only in the way you're designing, in the way you're defining the interfaces with other systems, in the way you're securing the devices themselves, etc. So we're doing at least some elements on that. Not only we're doing a lot of things on the security of the connections, etc., on the identity systems, on the authentication mechanism, on the secure elements we're putting for all that. But they're really we've been able to work and now to distribute those guidelines so that everybody has a kind of global understanding of what security means.
No, and this is really important, and I'll ask you for that link so that people can go to the Orange Orange site and be able to read more about it. Last question is, where do you see the growth areas right now for your IoT business? Where are things going to get bigger, better, or I guess from a revenue perspective, where do you see the business going?
Well, we're seeing that in several industries, and we're speaking about vertical by vertical. We're seeing a growing demand for all the connected solutions. So we're seeing some growth not only in the B2B side, but also in B2C markets. We're seeing a growing number of solutions around smart home, around all the personal devices in the wellness environment. We're seeing a huge growth on all the health systems, which will probably be slower to emerge than what we're seeing, for instance, on automotive, on logistics, because there's a lot of regulations and steps to be approved with the solution, etc. But we're seeing a lot of interest into that. We've been, for instance, on health, we've been doing quite exciting works with French hospitals on some chronic diseases, where we were able, using some IoT solutions and data analytics, to predict some relapses in some chronic diseases, that we're seeing a very important growth and very important promise in the way we're developing, and the industry are developing some new medications. So once again, we think that the IoT is a global phenomenon that is going to touch all the different industries. Some will be quicker than others to emerge, but we're quite confident in the potential of the IoT.
Now, I get this question a lot. Now, you've mentioned smart home and personal devices, logistics, automotive, health. What would you say, if you squint your eyes, just roughly, but what would you say the top three verticals are for Orange today?
Well, automotive for sure, utilities, and the third one will be on the consumer market, where I will be including not only all the smart home devices, but also all the personal devices like pedometers, scales, etc., or weather stations, etc. Once again, the things we're doing in those environments are quite diverse. I was speaking at the beginning about the first idea we had when we were seeing all those devices being developed, and applications that were developed for each of those devices. So we've been working on that. We have something which was called Data Share, which is globally a set of connectors that are simplifying the fact that instead of developing, having one application per device, you just the ability to bring the connectivity to all those different objects into one single app. So this is something we're using yourself, but we're also making it available for our partners. So not only the application can handle devices coming from several providers, but it's giving back the control to the user. So you know how important this topic can be, not only for European companies, but now for all the global companies, that we're giving back the control to the customer on all these personal data. And I think that roughly those are the three major dimensions that we see. But once again, it's a global phenomenon, and I know only a few domains or vertical industries which are not targeted by the IoT developments.
Yeah, no, that's true. And if I was to ask a question, so automotive, utilities, and consumer, if I was to ask a question, what do you think in, let's say, 5 years, would it be the same list, or would you be putting in health and so forth?
Health for sure will have a strong role. So once again, I think that health has the bigger potential. So let's say that 5 years is probably enough to see some massive deployments being done in health as well. So in 5 years, we'll see, I think automotive will have changed. We'll see a lot of very exciting things with regards to all the autonomous cars. Yes. So we'll see where we are. 5 years is quite hard, for predictions.
I know.
It's 3 years, it's kind of doable. 10 years, it's impossible, but for long terms. But 5 years is in the middle. So whether I will still be driving my car or not is still a question.
Yeah, no, but I think health and automotive are probably two good bets. And it's interesting because when I was doing a mini series on AI, I actually had a futurist on, and they kind of break it down, sort of like what you were saying, 3 years, 1 to 3 years. I think it was 3 to 7 years, and then 7 to 20 years. And there's ways of measuring, one futurist against another. But no, I think this will be very suitable for now.
Yeah.
Well, that was awesome, Patrice. Can you let everybody know where can they find out more about you? Where can they find out what Orange is doing in IoT? And everyone, of course, I'm going to include the links in the show analysis notes, but just let people know while they're driving, while they're working out, while they're walking, whatever.
Well, on orange.com for sure, where all the significant elements about the companies are being presented. For most of the Orange IoT offers, I would strongly recommend the Orange Business Services site. And for everything which is touching the tools, the APIs, the security guidelines, etc., I think the Orange developer site, and once again we'll provide the links, is a very good place where we've tried to summarize from a developer or from a project manager standpoint, the steps and the decision that they have to make if they want to start building an IoT solution. So I think it's pretty well done, and it's quite worth visiting those sites.
Definitely. And I'll get this offline, but I'm also interested in having a link to the platform offerings, so not just to the connectivity, but also to the platform offerings.
Yeah, Data Avenue, which is something you will find from the Orange Business Services. Yeah, Data Avenue. It's a venue, and it's not an avenue, it's a venue, because it's the place where we put the data. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, Patrice.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
Okay. Always good talking with Patrice. This podcast goes vertical, deep diving into different topics each week. If you prefer a more horizontal and structured approach to learning IoT business and its orbiting technologies, check out my book IoT Inc, published by McGraw-Hill, or become a certified IoT professional by completing the ICIP training and certification program. For details, just go to www.iot-inc.com. Also go to www.iot-inc.com for an analysis of this episode, links to things that were mentioned during the episode, and very importantly, the episode's PDF transcript. Just search for the name of the episode or the guest. If you're new to this podcast, subscribe. That way you'll get every week's episode delivered straight to your device. Or, if you've been listening for a while, there are 3 ways you can support the show. You can leave a rating or a review on iTunes. Just go to iot-inc.com/iTunes. It only takes 1 click to leave a rating, a little bit longer to leave a review. You can share it on social. I'm on LinkedIn, to a lesser extent on Twitter. And of course, you can support the show by buying my book, IoT Inc, or the ICIP training and certification program. It's how I pay the bills. Next week's episode is adding connected sensors to your product for IoT with Adam Justice of Grid Connect. I hope you can join me then. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Until next week, may your path to IoT business be a connected one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc Business Show.